You wouldn't want to talk me into an encore, would you?
Live from at the Reagan Library. Remember, we do these on the first Wednesday of every month. On the morning of March 30th, 1981, Ronald Reagan put on a brand new blue suit for a speech to the Construction Trades Council at the Hilton Hotel in Washington, D.C. The speech was well received, and upon its conclusion, the president exited through a side entrance, passing reporters, photographers, and TV cameras. As he approached the motorcade, he heard what sounded like 2 or 3 firecrackers. The head of his Secret Service quickly grabbed him from around the waist and hurled him into the limousine. In this live from, we're going to take a look at the assassination attempt on President Reagan's life and his will and determination to not just recover, but to get back to work, which to him meant helping bring an end to the Cold War. As the shots rang out, all aimed at President Reagan, 3 additional men were hit and wounded, including White House Press Secretary James Brady, Washington, D.C. policeman Tom Delahanty, and Secret Service agent Tim McCarthy. John Hinckley Jr. had fired 6 shots at President Reagan, all from a range of only about 15 feet. The bullet that hit President Reagan actually first hit the limousine. It flattened, and then it went into the President Reagan's body from the ricochet. It hit a rib, it went through his lung, and it landed just 1 inch from his heart. As I said earlier, as the shots rang out, the Secret Service, it was Jerry Parr, grabbed the president and hurled him into the limousine and actually jumped on top of him to protect him. The pain that President Reagan felt from the bullet wound was initially thought to be that of a broken rib, caused by the pressure of Jerry Parr jumping on top of him. So the motorcade started heading to the White House. But the president was having a really hard time breathing, and as he started coughing up a foamy blood, they immediately decided it was more serious and diverted the motorcade from the White House to George Washington University. So this case that I'm standing in front of contains some of the items from that day. This is that actual brand new blue suit I talked to you about. As you can tell, it was cut off of him, and you can see where the bullet went through the suit. A little funny, interesting story about this suit is that once the president recovered, he was actually really upset that the suit had been cut off of him. It was brand new. He really liked it. So he asked the tailor to make him an exact replica of the suit, which he wore throughout the presidency. In fact, he wore that second version of the suit to Berlin in 1987. when he famously declared, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. That version of the suit is also here on display at the Reagan Library in our Four Summits Gallery. So coming over here, this is a piece of the bullet-resistant glass from the limousine. This over here is a .22 caliber Rome RG-14 revolver. It's almost identical to the gun that John Hinckley Jr. used. The real gun is still in the possession of the FBI. And this up here might be a little hard to see with my shadow, the camera shadow, but this little item over here is the, actually you can see the flattened bullet and how close it was to President Reagan's heart. No one knew it at the time, but when President Reagan walked into the hospital, what grave danger he was really in. Now, you heard me right. The president walked into the hospital on his own. He walked up to a nurse. He told her he was having a really hard time breathing. They immediately put him on a gurney. He ended up losing over half of his blood that day. Miraculously, the hospital was having a doctor's conference that afternoon. There were specialists from every medical field there at the hospital when he arrived. That probably helped save his life. Even in the face of death, President Reagan never lost his sense of humor. To Mrs. Reagan as who's being wheeled into surgery, honey, I forgot to duck. To the surgeons, I hope you're all Republicans. To which the doctor replied, today, Mr. President, we're all Republicans. The president stayed in the hospital for 12 days. It was a life-threatening wound. He faced persistent infections, but his strong will and remarkable vitality helped lead to a steady recovery. After the surgery, the president had tubes down his throat, so he wasn't able to communicate, so he talked through notes to his doctors and nurses and his family. This one right here is actually one of my favorite. It says, if I had this much attention in Hollywood, I would have stayed there. Now, of course, not all of the notes were fun and lighthearted. Some showed confusion of the day and the time. The top one here actually says, I thought it was still afternoon. Now, as you can imagine, when news broke out about the shooting, well-wishers from around the world sent in gifts and notes offering a speedy recovery. The president received dozens and dozens of canes. We have 3 here on display. And this up here is the red sweater that President Reagan wore back to the White House when he was released from the hospital on April 11th, 1981. Now, writing about this shooting in his autobiography, An American Life, one of the things that President Reagan said is that while he was laying in bed recovering, he had a lot of time to think about all the problems our country faced and ways in which he wanted to deal with them. So when he was well enough to get back to work, one of the first things he did was write a letter to Brezhnev, who was the then Soviet leader. This here is a large enlargement of that letter. And the letter just talked about how he wanted to have a meeting with Brezhnev to open up discussions about bringing an end to the Cold War and ending the nuclear threat. President Reagan demanded that this handwritten letter be hand-delivered to Brezhnev, but unfortunately he received a very icy rejection letter back. But that didn't stop President Reagan. He knew face-to-face diplomacy was the right way to get this done. He kept reaching out to future Soviet leaders, and of course, he finally found a great partner in Mikhail Gorbachev. So thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you learned a little bit about the week and weeks surrounding the assassination attempt, a time that President Reagan wrote about in his diary when he said, whatever happens now, I owe my life to God, and I will try and serve him in every way that I can. We here at the Reagan Library think he really did accomplish that mission. So I'm going to finish this podcast the way we finish every podcast here, to ask you, if you haven't already, to please subscribe to our 2 audio podcasts, Words to Live By in a Reagan Forum. They can be found on Stitcher, SoundCloud, iTunes, and of course our website, reaganfoundation.org. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next month.
Let us take up the challenge to reawaken America's religious and moral heart, recognizing that a deep and abiding faith in God is the rock upon which this great nation was founded. Thank you all again, as I say, for being here, and God bless you all.